He took less than 5 minutes for a 2-hour game. But, of course, I was speaking for the last 2 minutes. There's a huge but here. And at this moment, I'm doubting whether or not I'm even doing recaps for this tournament. Dear chess fans, welcome back to another instructive game recap of my competitive chess tournament. Here we go, round 3. I have 0 out of 2, which is a tough tournament so far. And I'm paired against a FIDE master who has 2200. I hope this speaks to how strong this section is, this tournament is. I go with e4, my opponent goes with e5, and my opponent didn't want to just play a normal gioco piano or normal Italian. No, he had a little surprise hidden behind his back, ready to be unveiled. And so I go knight f3, knight c6, everything is normal, bishop c4, and now knight f6. So far so good, d3, slow Italian, and my opponent goes with h6. Now we have seen this move before in my tournament in Reykjavik, Iceland, in which my opponent played this and then ended up playing like a system like g5 and bishop g7. And in this moment, I completely forgot what white is supposed to play against systems like this. White is supposed to castle immediately, and once you close the center, we go with like rook e1, and then on g6, you're met with a nice d4, immediately targeting that center. I played my own game. I went with a4 here. a4 is not necessary at this point in the game because a4 is played usually to avoid the knight trapping my bishop and forcing to win the bishop pair. Although now, things like this do not work because of knight takes e5. That's why typically you play a4 after the pawn goes to d6 in the structure, defending that pawn and thus threatening knight a5. But h6 is played, I go a4 way too early and my opponent goes with a6, still responds to a4 in an appropriate manner, and now castles. So that if my opponent goes bishop c5, this transposes to the normal, completely normal, slow Italian that we know and love. And now I would just go into my own spiel with c3. However, if my opponent closes with d6, I was prepared to go knight c3 here, to jump to d5, and that's where I get my advantage. You see the bishop is not on c5 anymore, so there's less control over d4, and I can just jump here like this and then play against this knight with c3. I go with c3 myself here. I didn't like this knight c3. I decided against it at the last second because I evaluated against things like bishop here. Knight d5 would have been strong. I don't know why I didn't play this finally. Something told me to not do it, so I played c3. My opponent goes with g6, and this is a completely new system that I have yet to play against over the board. First time I play against this. Surprisingly, out of the first 3 games of this tournament, 2 have been completely new openings to me played over the board. I've never faced them over the board in my 69 recaps now that we have filmed. Incredible. So I go rook e1, defending my pawn to strike in the center with d4, bishop g7, and now better than ever, it's time to go d4. You just want to, even though you're losing a time by moving that pawn twice, you just need to go d4 before your opponent goes d5. And this is a big learning lesson from this game that I took out of it. No matter the result. Knight bd2. Here I just want to structure my knight in a way to go maybe to e3. But I realized that this plan is not that good anymore, or it's slowed down because typically you want to bring the knight to g3. But now that a pawn is played to g6, this system, by the way, was invented by Mihai Marin, a grandmaster from Romania. Here the knight is just completely restricted on the king's side and doesn't look as active. So why bother? Castles is played, and now I go knight f1, and now my opponent strikes in the center first with d5. And believe it or not, after I take and takes, I am completely puzzled here as to what white should do. What's the plan for the white pieces in this position? I took a lot of time, and throughout this game, my opponent, you'll look at his clock throughout the game, it's really crazy. He took less than 5 minutes for a 2-hour game. Very risky if you ask me. So I go with a5 here, which after the game, I analyzed it with a grandmaster and he told me that a5 in this position is not that good. But at the time, a5 is to restrict the knight from going to b6 and attacking my bishop. Very prophylactic, and I'm preventing all sorts of b5 things, etc. The pawn here is space grabbing and it's preventing as well. However, my opponent responds to this in a very awkward manner. He goes with the strike b5, which is not really a strike because I can play the special move in chess that we call en passant. A takes b6. If I don't play takes, my bishop loses a time and my opponent just gains a lot of space, so it's very appropriate that we take it here now. If my opponent takes with the knight, this pawn structure is horrible, and in the game I was like, what is this move? It's terrible. It forces B takes here, C takes B, pardon, and these pawns are kind of hanging. Not that nice. I've opened an A file for my rook to pressure this pawn, and overall I really enjoy the white pieces here. Although, still no plan. Rumor has it that days after this game I was still thinking of a plan for white. Now I play queen b3, attacking this knight. I'm trying to strike in the center. I'm trying to bring my pieces in. And after the knight moves to e7, here I was thinking of an incredibly long, incredibly interesting line for the white pieces. Bear with me here. Here I was thinking of bishop e3 attacking this pawn. And now on something like b5, I could take this pawn here because it is pinned to the rook and you cannot take back with a pawn. That being said, I saw this really cool tactic for black, knight a5 attacking my queen and getting rid of this pin on the pawn. My queen would have to move, let's say queen c2, and then I would lose a full piece. Thankfully, I have b4 here that I saw. And now I'm reacting against my opponent's pin once again, and I would win back the piece, but for a pawn. So let's say any move here, really, just like queen c7, let's say, takes, queen takes, and now it's still equal in this position, but my opponent has a weak pawn on b5, you could argue. I saw that, I was thinking, and I was like, nah, it's not that good. Then I saw rook a5. I went back into my analysis, and I said, what if I sacrifice the exchange in this position? The queen takes on a5, and now I would have bishop c4, threatening bishop b6 to trap this queen. And I know what you're thinking. You can't just play any other move, because on bishop b6, rook a b8, if I takes, and this is the beauty of it all, my queen was defended, and I'm up a rook here, so you can't do that. So it's a legitimate threat. I was thinking the queen has to move to c7. This pawn is attacked, so let's attack the queen and bring in another attacker on e5. Queen moves back, and then I was thinking of things like d4. I was thinking of things like bishop c5 to go on this, and I overall thought that white has complete compensation for the exchange. And if we put the eval bar on, white has a small edge, and I'm very proud that I saw that. But, of course, I was speaking for the last 2 minutes, there's a huge but here. After playing bishop e3, my opponent plays b5 as planned, and after I take this pawn with my bishop, my opponent doesn't play knight a5. By the way, I played this immediately. He played rook b8, and this sliced my heart in half. My opponent's just pinning my bishop, and I have absolutely no move to counteract this. In fact, I'm just losing a full piece for a pawn. I tried to go for 2 pawns for a piece, and these are my 2 extra pawns for that piece, but the compensation is really not enough. And so my opponent plays bishop e6, attacking my queen here. I go with a queen move, just attacking this knight, and overall, I'll spare you the details. A few moves later, it doesn't pan out well for the white pieces. The black pieces just neutralize my pawns. I cannot make progress, and the piece up is just entirely felt in this position. Here, I resigned, my 3rd game in a row. I have 0 out of 3 in the Sardinia World Chess Festival, and at this moment, I'm doubting whether or not I'm even doing recaps for this tournament. It was that bad. I'm losing over 15 points of rating, and this is a complete nightmare. Hopefully we bounce back in my next game against a 1900 who is also having a bad tournament. He was actually 2000 rated. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in episode 4 of season 9, Italy.